Welcome to Framework. I am Al Schwartz. With me, as always, John Bernard.
Hello.
And returning champion and dungeon master extraordinaire, Tyler Jakes.
Hey, thank you for having me back.
No problem. We are returning to the Forgotten Realms after a long, long hiatus. We had embarked on this grand, ambitious project of going through all of the Bioware role-playing games. Really because we wanted to talk about the more recent ones. These sort of like from Star Wars through Mass Effect and Dragon Age, I think was what we had in thinking about when we started this. But then we thought, okay, we should start where they started, which is the Baldur's Gate series, this Dungeons and Dragons series. And then we did the first episode and on the first Baldur's Gate game, and I realized in playing that one again that everything I remembered as being good about that game is mostly confined to Baldur's Gate 2. And that's where things get a lot, and things get a lot more Bioware-y. So it's actually fits with the rest of what we want to do a lot better. And so we decided, oh, you know what? I've already run through the first game. Let's just do the second game. We'll do that. It'll be fine. And then 8 months later, finally finished thing. I really underestimated how huge this game is.
It's enormous.
Yeah,
It's
massive.
I feel like this game is meant to be played over the course of years. You know, like this is a 3-year game. You know,
like least... a proper like Dungeons and Dragons campaign.
You know? Yeah. No, but I think that there's like this thing called life that gets in the way. As I'm playing it, my Steam, tells me, oh, you had got this achievement on this day, and they're all like story based things, and then you can see your friends and when they achieve them. And I just went down the rabbit hole saying, oh, this friend of mine, when did he achieve these things? One happened in 2017. The next one happened in 2018. The next one happened in 2019. And they're not that far apart in the actual game. So just sort of like, you come back to it on occasion.
Yeah.
It is kind of like a bridge between old PC titles, where the intention was that it's just this impossible task that you will, that you may never finish. A King's Quest, or any of those, adventure style Grim Fandango things where, you can spend 5 hours on a puzzle and you may not get it, without a walkthrough. And then into the modern age where they do not want you to ever need a walkthrough. It kind of has qualities of both of those. I ultimately very much needed a walkthrough for this.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine getting at this in 2021 without one. Like going in and being like, yeah, I'm gonna figure this out, on my own. I'm gonna figure all the mechanics of this out and all the puzzles, and I'm gonna approach it like, okay, I know exactly, like I'm gonna select this party member and follow that to its logical conclusion, unaware that it might cut me off from this entire other side of the game, unaware that it's going to, like there's so many things that are dependent on small choices you make at random intervals in this.
What does strike me about this, looking at it from a modern perspective, is the complete lack of like tutorials.
Yeah,
the way that modern game design is always like, okay, we're giving you a new ability now, and we're gonna sort of give you a little mission or a level or a task that's designed to like walk you through how that ability functions in the game world. And this is completely the opposite of that. There are just dozens upon dozens upon dozens upon dozens of abilities that are thrown at you. You can choose from, you can pick up from random items, and none of them have anything to walk you through.
And when you walk into Ithaka, I think, just every aspect of this game is thrown at you at once. You walk in and you're given a quest and you're like, okay, great, I'm going to follow that quest line. On your way there, another quest line and another quest line and another quest line. And oh, here's a party member you can choose. And here's another party member you can choose. And just all of these things are thrown at you and you're kind of pulled in all these directions. And you've no idea that in, modern storytelling, they're giving you the early quests early. You're going to do those. Then they're going to get to the middle game quests. Mm-hmm. And then, no, this one could have a lich that if you follow it down, you're about to die. And they give you no warning whatsoever. Or as another one could be just like follow a bunch of people and talk to them. And then you finish it and here's some XP.
Yeah, I definitely stumbled across a lich when I was like, I had one level under my belt of this. I was just like nowhere near it, like able to even damage it like one point.
I mean, this was my first, like the first board of the game, the Dungeon of Irenicus that you open up in. I was approaching this like I'm gonna piece this out. I'm gonna figure it out. I'm gonna play this through. I couldn't get out of that dungeon before I was running for hints and guides and moving the difficulty level down because I couldn't beat the first monsters that you come across.
I got halfway through like this first section and just kept dying, and I was like, "What is going on?" And then eventually I realized there was a chest in one of the early rooms that had all of my stuff in it that I just didn't get.
Yeah, well, that's okay. So I have got sections here I want us to go through. We'll start with the
Sure.
gameplay section then,
Okay.
and one of the subsections there is just difficulty and how this plays. I take some amount of pride, I guess, or just pride's not the right word, but stubbornness maybe, in that I always want to beat the game on the hardest difficulty. If it's because I'm not a
Did you
huge...
do that with this game?
Fuck no. So I'm not like an enormous, like a broad gamer. I don't buy games that often. I don't sample a ton of different things. I like to get one game and then it's a big long game and play that for a long time. And that means that I get a mastery of it and I want to, so all the other Bioware games, I'm going to play them on the hardest difficulty level. Whatever else, if it's a Red Dead Redemption or an XCOM or something, I'm going to do it on the hardest level. In this, like, normal difficulty was just punishingly difficult. Like, so part of that's because, like you said, they don't scale the quests as they give them to you. They don't give you a lot of hints as to which ones, like, this is a low level quest versus no, there's a dragon at the end of this one, and there's a lich in the middle of it.
And the dragon, if you say the wrong thing to him, you have to fight him.
Yeah. I mean, it's also hard to tell sometimes. Just I would get masked. I would just like walked into a hotel room and there's like another group of adventurers that are belligerent and want to like pick a fight with me, and I'm like, I can't beat these guys, and it takes me 12 tries.
Easy. And I would say that, like, most games follow the bell curve. This is a reverse bell curve. So, like, you're going to come into rooms, there'll be a fight, and there are sometimes where I didn't even realize that combat had occurred and the thing was dead because of just how powerful my characters were in comparison to what I was fighting. Then there are other times where you are going to reload this section at least 20 times before you figure out, before I come in this room, I have to rest so that I can make sure that I have these spells active on these characters so they don't get sent to the nether realms so that I don't die.
Yeah, that's the thing. There's a ton of just sort of like specialty attacks in this. They're those sort of like one hit kills on your people, or it banishes them, like I said, to another dimension. And those, I think, are not, they certainly up the difficulty level, but I find them more just frustrating and annoying than like challenging in a satisfying way to overcome, because it just has to be like you find the right shield against it and then it does nothing, or it kills you in one shot. And like I said, I complain about this in Baldur's Gate 1 too, that and Baldur's Gate 2 is a lot better about this. You can get some sort of knockdown drag out fights on this occasionally, but there's still a whole lot of either you take the biggest threat out in the first round and it's over very quickly, or they take you out in the first round and you have to restart it. And it's just like bam, bam, over one way or the other. And that's not as satisfying as having a sort of knockdown drag out fight where you're switching up tactics and trying different things and using different abilities and items as it goes. The dragon fights tend to actually function that way.
It seems to me that a big part of this is that this game, I mean, it basically demands that you have a pretty full understanding of D&D rules.
A mastery. Yeah.
Yes. Like you really got to know. And that's like what the spells do. What the spells that you don't have and don't have access to do, because they might be used against you or by somebody else in your party. You might need that spell to even hit this one enemy because of their current buff. There's a lot of that in this.
Sure, you have the pause button. like a lot of these CRPG games have implemented and continue to use to this day, where you can sort of turn it out, right? Like, so I've cast the spell, now I got to hit pause, choose my next spell, and fine. But the moment you hit unpause in this game, things are going at different speeds, at different rates. It's not really turn-based, it's more seconds that pass. And the number of times where a character would all of a sudden be dead, and I have no idea when that happened, and then I'd have to scroll back through the combat log to figure out what spell was cast, what had hit, what was that, a save that failed, or was it just simply this character is just going to die? Like fighting mind flayers, for example, just eating brains, characters dying left and right.
Yeah.
Yes, and this is a big barrier for me. This is a real problem for me with this game. I mean, this game is in many ways kind of amazing and kind of genius, and does some of the most influential, cool things the video games ever did. I find massive parts of it very unplayable for me. Like, I just can't handle it with my current, attention span, and the way my brain has aged. I just don't know that I've got it in me to really, really figure this game out and get a mastery of the combat system and the inventory system and all the things you have to understand, and the spell wheel and all these little things that you have to have in your mind to
John,
really
are you still playing a console port, or are you playing this on a
I got it on my Mac.
Okay.
You can play Baldur's Gate 2 on a Mac. It's old enough that a Mac can handle it. It's still not ideal, but it's considerably better than trying to play Baldur's Gate 1 on a PlayStation. I mean, I couldn't have gotten anywhere on that. Yeah,
I was playing it on an Xbox, and that's part of what I think was killing me, is that even having the mastery of the combat system, understanding how it works fully, it was just calling up the battle log is such a pain in the ass on there, and like scrolling up and down, and it's almost impossible to read. So I just didn't have the patience for that. And speaking of not having the patience, so in Baldur's Gate 1, I went in with my sort of genius, knowing this game system very well. I decided that I was going to make a mage cleric combo. And so my guy would have access to all the spells, and I would be...
So, airy.
Yeah, more or less. But this is in Baldur's Gate 1 before she came around. And I was thinking, like, later on, this person will start very weak, but as they go on, they'll eventually have access to all. I will be a walking, weapon of mass destruction. And I got through Baldur's Gate 1 and into Baldur's Gate 2, and I realized, like, that's probably true. I would be the most powerful guy around, but I just don't have the patience to manage all the spells. It is such a pain in the ass. The spell system in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons sucks. There are a lot of cool spells and a lot of cool spell effects, but of all the things we spent a lot of the last episode complaining about how second edition rules are insane and convoluted and unintuitive in so many ways. One thing we didn't even touch on is the way that you cast spells in Dungeons and Dragons is that each day you have your spell book that includes the number of spells that have access to. If you're a wizard, a priest does not have a spell book, but they have a list of spells they choose from. And each day, I guess the conceit is when you wake up in the morning, you spend some time committing a certain number of spells to memory. And then later in the day, when you use one of those spells, it is wiped from your memory. And you can only use it once that day. And except you could memorize it more than one copy of it, I guess. So you can cast it more than once.
Yes. So pieces of that memory are gone, but it's not as if you can recall from the other ones. Yes.
Yeah. But what kind of autistic meth addict came up with this as opposed to just having spell points?
Well, we eventually got there. We eventually got essentially to spell points with D&D, but I have to completely agree with you that I think that this was a case of, I've made mages and spellcasters in general the most powerful gods in the game. I have to limit their power in some way, shape, or form, and this is the only way I can conceivably come up with an answer for it.
This is like the 894th way that would occur to me to limit their ability. Being able to cast once a day, okay, but in this weird memorization thing, how did that come into it?
There is some version of there is lore there. like there's an in-world explanation, however kind of non-intuitive and weird it is. Like that's how spells work, is that they sort of magically evaporate from your brain. That makes
Yeah.
some more, in-world sense than spell points. But for a game that's so devoted to math, and
I just what John, I don't agree with that whatsoever. I think as lore, that is a complete convoluted nonsense relative to just you have a certain amount of energy and it depletes you
I'm playing
throughout
devil's
the
advocate.
day.
It's not good. It's really infuriating. It's why you wouldn't want to play spellcaster in
Yeah.
version 2, or it's yeah. And I mean, that's why I was like, you know what, I'm going to be a barbarian when I play Baldur's Gate 2. I ditched my original character. I mean, I guess I never finished that, so it wasn't anything to import anyway. And just like, what's going to be the simplest thing for me here? A barbarian, right?
All of
who
that
just
was to
hits
say
things.
that I ditched my spellcaster from 1 and started a totally new character in 2 that was just a paladin with an undead fighting specialty, because I remembered from 20 years ago that you fight a lot of vampires in this game and that level drain is annoying as shit. So I chose the one that was immune to that.
And I played a rogue to I think 6th level in the first one, and then multi-class into fighter. So I can see all traps, I can disarm all traps, I can unlock all doors. So I got that utility down. But I knew I did not want to be playing with spells, so it's just how many attacks can I get in a round, and give me a bow, please.
We
Yeah.
all had the same strategy. That's great.
You can't do without magic in this game. You need
No,
magic in your party, so you still have to.
you
Yeah,
you have to have Edwin. You have to have Edwin.
I didn't.
Period. Really?
No, who did I used Aerie for a while, but then she up and left me.
Playing
And
evil, huh?
no, I was playing good,
Oh.
but I screwed up the romance. I guess I was not intending to romance her, but I guess I led her on a little too much, and she got upset with me and just pieced out halfway through the game. And I was like, "Well, shit."
I understand that's a problem with Aerie in this. That she will leave you at the drop of a hat if you screw up the romance.
I had M1 for later in the game. That made up for it, I guess.
I put a lot of my eggs. I put a lot of my eggs into Yoshimo.
Oh,
yeah.
So this, all right, before we get into the story stuff, because I think that is some interesting stuff. Like I will say, this relates back to what we were talking about, how there's too many game elements here to even give you tutorials on them. But as far as like character and class creation in this game is so incredibly deep. Like I think BioWare refines this a bit as time goes on, and you get to there's basically like 3 classes, and a couple of races perhaps, and genders you can choose from. But in this, man, the combinations you can do are endless. There must be hundreds of race class combinations.
When I came across a character, Valagar, I think his name is, and I saw that his class was Stalker, I was like, I've never heard of this class before. What does that mean?
What does that mean? What
I
is
have
a
no
stalker?
idea.
Okay. What are the special abilities of a stalker?
No clue.
Night vision, maybe?
No, I completely agree with you.
They're a ranger, I believe, of some sort. But I don't know what their special abilities are. That's like there's not just a bunch of classes. Each one has like 3 or 4 specialties to choose from, and I think this is actually a benefit to the game. They do provide genuine bonus, like useful bonuses based on your specialty, and some drawbacks that go with it. And they make it so like if I had chosen a wizard slayer instead of an undead slayer, like that my character would have played differently.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say though that at this level of play, once you get past level 6 in second edition Dungeons and Dragons, the differences between abilities is so micro that it doesn't really matter. I feel like when I'm playing a paladin versus a fighter versus a thief versus a they all in combat act exactly the same with very, very, very little difference. And when I'm playing a cleric versus a mage versus a conjurer versus an abjurer versus they all play essentially the same. And so I think that's probably why BioWare refined it, because at this point you're dealing with differences of one THAC0 or one armor class or maybe 5 hit points, and that doesn't matter. It just doesn't.
I don't know. I think there's some differences there, like between rogues and warriors, at least, that using backstabs or ranged weapons versus being a frontline fighter is a difference. And I mean, the way that's been refined through other, not just role playing video games, is that you get sort of the basic silos of, you got your magic user. Maybe there's like an offensive and a healing variety there, but the magic user stays in the back. You've got the frontline tank that has the best defense and health, but doesn't do quite as much damage. And you have the damage per second dealer, the person who's just the heavy hitter, but is a little softer to the touch. And then maybe like a ranged attack, somebody who shoots bows or sniper, whatever variants. And I think that's sort of what you're talking about. That yeah, your tank could take 18 different permutations, but they play essentially the same. That They run in and bash things.
Exactly.
And I mean, functionally in Baldur's Gate 2, the way it would manifest would be like, oh, well, I pushed on pause and my guy died. Okay, I'm going to reset. Oh, he made it this time. Okay, we'll go one more move. And he died again. Got to reset. Good thing I saved after the last hit. And that's similar, no matter who you are, whether it worked or not. That's kind of what it boils down to. This is the thing about this combat. This is the hugest problem for me. I mean, all this game is so impressive in so many ways. I just can't enjoy this fighting system. I just cannot do it. And the inventory is the same way, but specifically the fighting, it is such a direct transposition of D&D fighting, functionally, in that, when you're playing a D&D fight, pen and paper style.
And the worst version of it. Like, to be fair, and to go back to our conversation last time, or your conversation about BG1, it is the worst iteration of mechanics for D&D that existed, and I agree with John that it is the reason why I don't like this game. I'm finishing it simply to finish it.
Oh wow.
Well, and there are mechanics to it. Well, let me say this. Okay, I agree with you that the combat becomes a chore here because it demands micromanaging, but also micromanaging is very difficult, and it only lets you do it up to a point, because I can micromanage things by pausing and giving each of my 6 party members different orders to do. What I can't do is manipulate or even see the order in which they will occur.
Right.
And so when I unpause, it's just this big frenetic stew of things that occur, and then I got to pause it again and roll back the battle log and see what's what. I'm usually not doing that, so I'm just coming up with something where, like, okay, everybody survived that big pop of sound in color,
right?
So now I'll pause it again and see what else I can do. But it would be very helpful, and I feel like it's information that you should have as a player. You're supposed to have to know, like, okay, I pull up my wizard and he's got 18 spells to choose from, and if I cast a magic missile, that will happen essentially instantaneously. But if I cast monster summoning 3, that's going to take a while, and there will be like 8 other attacks or actions that will execute between when I tell him to do that and when he actually does it. And there's no indication for me like which spells go faster than others, really, other than after a while you notice that magic missiles go really fast, but others don't. But it would be great, and if I have to do the micromanaging, if that's what the game is designed to do, to be able to time things out like that is important. Like, I think I mentioned XCOM in passing earlier, and I think that's a game that I'm way into, and I think does turn-based combat in a way that is very satisfying, because you can manipulate the order in which your attacks are going. That I'm having my grenadier shoot first, and then the sniper bullet comes in, and it's this and that, and you kind of know where the enemy's attacks are going to come in as well.
Well, this is such a thing, though, and I mean, like, I was thinking during this, like, JRPGs, like, made 10 years before this game, had such an elegant turn-based fight system in comparison, where you can see exactly what you're doing, and see okay, he's coming after me, so after that, then I'll have this. And it breaks reality in the sense that it's not all just instantaneous as a fight would be, but I don't know any game that has effectively done that, and most don't even try. Baldur's Gate, kind of does that, I guess. but it's difficult. And again, if you're playing this, pen and paper style, one combat encounters, one volley of attacks from everyone will take 30 minutes to get through. It's much slower. It's much slower paced, and there's less combat as a result.
Because it's slower, though, that
Yeah.
micromanaging works in that
Yes.
way, that you can
Yes. It's not
you
just
can
chaos.
choose to hold back for a second so that your archer can shoot his acid arrow in before you dive in or whatever the case may be. Like you're saying, a Final Fantasy system, like for example, in both these turn-based combat systems, it is like speed of attack is really important. It's just the speed of things is so much more opaque in Baldur's Gate that you can pull up your inventory and look at a sword versus a staff, and they both have like speed ratings. But one might say that it gets an extra attack per round, which is a huge deal. Except when you unpause the game and see the combat, there's no way to tell if somebody's going faster than anybody else. It's very not intuitive.
Unless you get to the point of let's say a rogue or a fighter where you're getting, multiple attacks. You will notice bam, 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 bam. Like there is that gradient, but by and large, you're not noticing that one off.
Well, no, and the animation doesn't tell you anything.
Oh no,
about that. Whereas in Final Fantasy, you can see the attack meter building up, and so maybe you can see the ninjas thing moving faster than the wizards, and that gives you a more intuitive sense of drawing your attention to the fact that his attacks are weaker, but he's getting to do them so much more quickly that's I'm still relying on him a lot more, and that's probably true of my rogue, that's got two swords and is very fast compared to the big guy in the plate mail swinging a giant warhammer. But watching the battle play out, there's no indication of that. I have to dig through the battle log to see the difference there.
And I'm sure that you don't want to spend forever on gameplay, but another crunchy element that I feel like is actually built into Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, but more painfully in 2, is that there's no fast travel. And granted, this is me coming back to the games after playing more modern ones, but the fact that on the map they have indicators of places that you want to go, and I can click on them, but I can't actually do anything but walk there because the game has ingrained in it, after a certain amount of time, it's going to roll a die behind the scene, and maybe I'll get attacked by bandits, or maybe it'll be hobgoblins. And the thing that really irks me about that in this game is that these random encounters are never actually deadly. It's just spend some time,
they were
bash some people. Oh, okay. Well, I just felt like it was, Edwin fires off a fireball and okay, we're done now. But now I had to spend all this time pausing, setting up my stuff, doing the thing. Then they all die, and now I get to keep walking to the thing that I knew I wanted to walk to anyway. And I got 1,000 experience, which we all know that gets you nowhere in the scheme of leveling up.
Yeah, I will say this though. I do like how this game starts you at a high enough level that you feel like we're complaining about how some of the quests are too difficult to start with, but you're not starting this game like the first game killing rats. As soon as you're out of that first dungeon, you've got some decent gear, your people have actual abilities, and the quests you're taking on, even the quote unquote low level quests, the easiest ones, are still they feel worthy of a D&D module, that there is a whole castle that's been overtaken by trolls, and we're going to go take on this army of trolls ourselves. That's one of the easier ones, but it feels more satisfying than that versus there's a pack of 3 wolves and it's going to take me 45 minutes to figure out a way for my guys to get away from them.
Yeah, I think that based on hearing your episode on BG1, I think that there's a little bit of difference that we have here, because I find every combat encounter is a dragon or mind flayer or 4 mages or a demon from the abyss is hard for me to swallow. I'm doing that every 15 to 30 minutes in this game, every single quest. That's what I'm doing. That gets boring to me too. So yes, they have to up that difficulty factor because you're so much more powerful, but this is actually where D&D in general falls off for me, because I don't buy it. I don't buy fighting gods all the time. I don't buy being a god all the time. But I also agree with you that yes, fighting wolves constantly would get very, very boring.
Well, I'm saying that an encounter with 3 wolves in Baldur's Gate 1 could be harder than fighting a group of beholders in Baldur's Gate 2, because it's
Mhm.
where you are relative to them. But it's more satisfying, I think. And I take your point about just saturation, I suppose. But when there
Yeah.
is a challenging fight, it's more satisfying when it's against a serious creature and not something that is a placeholder. Like,
Oh yeah, killing Furkrag was incredible. When I
yeah,
actually was able to down him, that was incredible. But I think that's because it was the first dragon that I fought.
yeah. Well, okay. Let's. I
Well,
guess the one other thing in gameplay that I wanted to talk about was just that how they manage the sense of the open world versus putting the story on rails and giving you some direction and momentum. And what I think is a little unusual about this one, to me, that there's the way Bioware games are set up. You generally have an opening sequence, and then a a couple of like missions that are sort of on rails to get the story like going. And at some point, you kind of get your stripes from whatever you get, made into a Jedi officially, or a Grey Warden, or given your own ship in Mass Effect, and it reaches to that point where it's like, okay, now you have to track down a bunch of clues or do a bunch of things, but it's up to you where to go anywhere in the world to start your search. And in most in Bioware games, I feel like that point comes quite a bit farther on, whereas really as soon as you're out of the first dungeon, you get this sort of sequence where the Cowled Wizards show up and take away, I guess, an MON. And it's just like, all right, your goal is to gain 20,000 gold, which is a ton. And the entire world is now open to you. Find it any which way you can, and go. And that happens very early, I think, relative to a Knights of the Republic or a Mass Effect game.
I mean, relatively, it's if you spent 6 hours on that first dungeon, maybe. Uh, uh, yeah, it does do that, and then it really lets you go. It really, it opens it up in a way that is it's one of those daunting openings. This is another thing in video games where that I've become kind of familiar with is when they front load all the open world. When they kind of realize that the narrative they have doesn't actually allow for a ton of divergence. When you're on a pirate island or whatever, you can't go too many other places. So all the big open world side quests, all that stuff that they want to include in the game, kind of gets dumped early on, and you're just kind of adrift for a while. I mean, this has always been a thing. Like Dragon Age, the
Inquisition.
Inquisition, yeah, had a huge thing with that. Final Fantasy 15 had a huge thing with that, which is an open world game until you get to a certain story point, and then it's not at all. And I rarely find that satisfying. I mean, I spent most of my time in Baldur's Gate playing just in the opening city of Athkatla and the surrounding regions, because I was pursuing multitudes of side quests that just expanded and grew into bigger side quests and larger ones. Once you hit the Copper Coronet, there's, I don't know, a dozen or more potential party members there, and each of them has their own side quest. And since I'm looking at a walkthrough, I know none of them are reachable after I hit a certain point and pay that 20,000 gold. So I'm kind of just like trying all of them out and seeing what kind of party I want to have, and trying to judge who's going to get me the furthest. I need magic users. Can I use this vampire? She seems really cool.
I used Hexet. Yeah.
She is. I'm probably not an evil character. Is that a problem? Turns out it is. Those sort of calculations. That's a huge part of the game. It does, kind of slow you down a little.
And if you're a completionist like me, I am literally going to each of those characters, picking them up into my party, doing their quest, getting the XP for myself, and then dumping them, and then going to do that again and again and again until I've done all of them.
Yeah.
And then I get my party and I move on through the game. And that is a lot of stuff to do, which is incredible from a gameplay standpoint. There's so much to do that it actually felt to me even larger than BG1 with the amount of open world choices and options and quests that I had at my fingertips, to the point of actually being overwhelming.
Yeah, it's unquestionably bigger than BG1, right? I mean, it's a lot bigger, right?
Much bigger. But there's more story than there is in BG1. The world in
appreciate
one
that, yeah.
feels a lot more open and a little more empty, that you're just in wilderness, sort of just wandering across random wolves and gnolls, and no like story points a lot more, where they're and like there's more writing to the quests.
Yep.
You know, that there are story beats to the quests, which tended to be more just go to this region and kill this thing and then come back to me, is how a lot of the quests in number one were.
Like the Umar Hills, where you get there and you think it's one way. You meet up with Drake, whatever his name is, and he says it's a different way, and then you have this choice. You know, this is when did the game come out? Like, you have the choice of, do I believe him? Do I not believe him? Do I kill him if I not believe him? Do I, you know, and then like all of these different sort of spidery tendrils that give you some agency as which way the quest goes, and they're all valid. The game doesn't punish you. It maybe rewards you more if you go a certain way, but like if you want to just kill off the gnolls, then do it. Fine, cool. And that's what you chose.
And because you have a better defined, more involved villain here, I think there is more of a sense that those side quests and the detours are not utterly disconnected from the main storyline. That you find as you wander around that Irenicus, your enemy, has like his fingers in a lot of pies. He's touched it. Like a lot of people have encountered him. Like even the other enemies and the other quests, like might know of him at least.
And you get to ask everybody, hey, I'm looking for Irenicus. I'm looking for Imoen. Do you guys know anything? And everyone has a response.
Yeah. There's variations on no, not really. But but they're individuated. Like, you know, they have a voice actor who's saying them more so. Whereas you didn't really know what Saravak, who he was, what his deal was until like chapter 5 of Baldur's Gate out of 6. So,
Johnny, back to the story here, aren't we?
Yeah, we're into the story area now.
Okay. There was one last thing I wanted to say about the gameplay.
Okay.
Which was, I think the way we're describing this kind of makes it sound like some sort of dangerous mountain, you know, like it really is hard. It really is difficult. For me, I think ultimately too challenging to really enjoy. As difficult as I have found it, as much as the combat and the inventory systems are huge barriers for me to have fun with this game and enjoy this game, I went on YouTube and I watched videos of people talking about this to kind of fill in the gaps of what I missed during my playthrough. And there is such a passion for this game. People love this game. This is one of the great RPGs to so many people. And I'm trying to square that in my head. And I feel this sort of niggling little doubt that is just like, am I just a basic bitch at this? Am I just not able to handle how hardcore Baldur's Gate 2 is?
Can I ask you a question? Because I didn't go down the YouTube rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Did you find the people who are enamored with this on YouTube and the media places that you were looking to be our age and older? Or were there? Okay, no, but I think that's really important, because I would say the people who are loving, enamored, fascinated by this game were ones who grew up with it, who played it in its infancy when it started as a game before EE came out. And I would say that myself, yourself, coming back to it later, have a different lens because of what has changed in gameplay. I would say that's the difference. These aren't people who are like 10 years old today trying to play the game. I would ask a 10-year-old to try and have fun.
A lot of Zoomers probably not into this. Yeah.
I did try and get a 10-year-old to play this. My stepson I'd had some success introducing him to like the early Final Fantasy games on the Super Nintendo and Secret of Mana, you played Chrono Trigger, and we liked those. And I was like, well, here's the next iteration of RPGs, and it's one that I liked when I was younger, and that I'm going to be doing for the podcast. So I introduced him to it and tried to like ease him into it, but it was just there's no way in. Like I'm trying to explain the THACO system, and I gave up on that like 30 seconds in. Like the more I talk out loud, the more it sounds to me like I'm having a stroke trying to describe the system. I know it's not making any sense to you, but I think your general point, though, I definitely agree with that. It is that when this came out, there was nothing like it. Like there had never been anything like this. Like there had been fantasy stuff, sure, there had been role-playing games, but nothing that touched on the level of sandbox, just complete freeform, try whatever you want in whatever order you want ness that this was built into this game's design. These games, about 1 and 2, I suppose. But again, 1 was sort of creating a system where that could work, and 2 was taking that system and managing to tell a story, an actual story inside of it, and introducing a cast of characters that are actual characters, and not quick sketches that they don't want to fill in too much because they want to leave open the option that you're going to murder them on site. And so they don't want to write 16 hours of content for somebody that you might kill in 30 seconds when you meet them.
Right. Eri. I mean, they do that with Eri. Like, she comes out as a troll initially, or as you see her, she's glamored to look like a troll, and you can just kill her very easily at that moment, which drops an enormous plot line out of the game. There's so much stuff like that in here. I mean, I guess that is it. It's just, it's the beginnings of Bioware. I mean, why we're doing this at all. That's the thing that's kind of magical about this, is you can see all the stuff that they get so adept at and so famous for right here in the infancy. And if anything, it's not even a putative version of that stuff. That stuff is almost maximalist here. It's almost more than ever in this game.
Yeah, there's a sense where the ambition or the scope of things actually scales back in future iterations of BioWare games. There is a comfort here with the idea that, like, you're just not going to be able to access all the content in a single playthrough. You're not going to be able to access half of all of the content in a single playthrough, because so much of it is unique to, like, if you're being a good alignment, you're going to play this content, and the evil stuff is totally different. There's a lot of stuff that's specific to your class that you choose. Depending on which romance you choose, there's whole storylines that open up, and there might be 4 or 5 different romance options in here, but you can only do 1 per game. And there's probably some stuff that's unique to the race you choose, or just even stuff that's not explicitly, there's the good path and the evil path, but just how you resolve a plot line changes things up. And I think in the future, there is more of a sense where in a Mass Effect or a Dragon Age, they want you to have some options for how you resolve plot lines, but they don't. It's considered a failing of game design if they present you with, option A, B, C, and if you choose C, it cuts off a huge portion of content from the future of the rest of the game. And this game is very much okay with that.
Oh yeah. Yeah, more than any game, maybe. I mean, there's so much in this that you can just not do. Like, again, and this really kind of screws you up when you're an OCD completionist. Like, I think most of us, the 3 of us at least, are when it comes to RPGs.
Yeah, any RPG, like, constant RPG players have to have some of that.
Mm-hmm.
But if there's a game that cured me of completionism, it's this one. Like,
yeah,
Skyrim did me.
Yeah. I gave up on Skyrim entirely. This one, eventually, I was like, okay, I'm just going to go through it, and it's okay that I'm not going to get a lot of this stuff. There are whole things that, and part of that was that's what I mean by this having an actual story. It does feel like there are consequences here, and a lot of them were unintended consequences, things that I did not mean to happen.
Viconia, I was like, she got burned alive. I was supposed to do something. I didn't know I needed to do something. How did I do something? Reload. Try again. Nope, she got burnt. Okay, so... And eventually I figured out you had to touch the wood underneath her with your little mouse cursor. Oh my god, that's another aspect of this gameplay I don't even want to get on, is that if you're interacting with an object, you have to be close to it. Otherwise, the game understands that clicking on something means you want to go over to it.
Right. Unless it's a thing you can actually interact with.
Yeah.
And some of the stuff is just genuine. Like, the gameplay was not explained to me in a way that got through to my thick skull. Like, for example, there are portions of this game, at some point in this game, your character can get a stronghold of some sort, and it varies
Yeah.
depending on what your class is, and it's different for everybody. If you're a fighter, I think you basically take over that castle that the trolls
Mhm.
had taken over.
Yep.
If you are a wizard, you can take over a planar sphere that has teleported from the outer realms into the middle of the city of Athkatla, which is its
Cool.
great own like quest line that you can do with other things, but as a wizard, you get to take over it, and then now it's like your base of operations. I was a paladin, so I think there was an option for me to join the Order of the Radiant Heart, I believe it's called. The
Yeah.
That's got and get like my own apartments in their headquarters in the city there. And I got a quest that said, "Hey, we've got if you want, this is like your entrance exam. Uh, we've got a guy or a couple of guys out in the hills that are being attacked by ogres or whatever. They need help. Like, hurry up, go get them." So that goes in my quest log, and I think that's like every quest that they say, "Oh, it's this dire emergency," and that will be coming to a head whenever you get there.
Mhm.
And I didn't realize in this one that actually meant that there was like a 3-day clock that was put on
Yep.
me. And
Mhm.
so in the same room from another guy, I had gotten a different quest, and I went and did that one first, and then I came back and I was like, I couldn't find those guys. Like, what happened there? And he's like, they died, you shithead. You're banned from here forever. And I'm, oh, damn.
Or the gentle nudges from your companions. Hey, you said that you were going to help me find the book
Yeah.
of Kuzza. Why haven't we done that yet? I just don't feel like it yet. I'm going to leave. And then
Yeah.
they do, and you're like, oh, I guess I should go do that right now.
Well, I mean,
Well,
this is stuff they kind of got. I don't know. I don't know. Is it more uncompromising to keep it like this, or to do like Mass Effect style, where you just the timelines are not just direct like that. You don't actually have a ticking clock. They just kind of imply you do.
Well,
And there's story beats, but mostly you know what you're doing. Like, okay, if I go to this story mission, that might cut off these other things, so I'll do them first. That.
I think it's an interesting compromise, because I think that ultimately what this does, when you have something unforgiving where like a party member is going to leave or a quest line is just lost, is because this game is so much save scumming, you quick save constantly, is that you just do the quest. Whereas I think later iterations of RPGs, Bioware, etc., just were like, people are just going to save scum, so like let's just let them do it whenever they want. And I think that's kind of the outcropping of this.
yeah. I think ultimately the way that this evolved, it makes sense. Uh, that people there's an assumption that you could say, oh, it's Bioware goes soft, and they're not willing to do this unforgiving thing anymore. But another way of putting it would be that they start to value the gamer's time more, and
Yeah.
saying, we're not going to force you to start the whole game over. We're not going to have you like make
Or
an
replay
oversight
it.
like I did,
Yeah.
and punish you permanently for that. And I think they get better at going back to something John was talking about earlier, like with Inquisition, for example. Yeah, it kind of drops you into the open world very early there, but I think Inquisition is a lot better about seeding those story missions, and at different points throughout the narrative. And so you have those in there, and then you go back to the open world, and maybe things are changed. A couple things might be gone, like options might be gone at that point. But I think they get better at mile marking, saying, okay, here's a story mission. You can go do your wandering side quest stuff for a while. When you're ready to proceed with the plot, this is the thing. Go to this, fly to this planet in Mass Effect. And having a series of those throughout, so that there is I guess, more of a sense of progression and pacing. Whereas in this one, I said, this is divided into chapters. I think there's 6 or 7 chapters, but
Mm-hmm.
it's chapter 2 starts, and that's where they open up the whole world and say, go make a buttload of money and come back. And I probably spent as much time in chapter 2 as I did in chapter 3, 4, 5, and 6 combined.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Easily.
things move more linearly once the story starts actually moving there.
Yeah, exactly.
Rarely a fan of that structure, but I mean, I get the necessity of doing it if you want to include all those things. What I would say about Chapter 2 that is so cool is that it really does seem like the biggest replication of a D&D console adventure that is just happening live. You're making your own choices, following your own direction, in a way that almost to a fault, that is kind of beyond most video games to do. It really, really goes for it, and says like, here, create your own path line through this. Figure out how you're going to do it. What's interesting to you, that's what you go for. It, short circuits when you go with OCD guys like us who are just like, I'm going to experience it all, of course. But theoretically, if you were just going to like, okay, I'm going to experience this as I'm getting the required amount of gold. I'm going to do quests until I get then, and that'll kind of decide my party. That feels like exactly what a D&D campaign would feel like as a video game. And that's pretty cool that they pulled that off and that it feels so big.
And what they're getting better at too is the cast being more reactive to your decisions and all that. And so, and this, I guess, goes on with the unforgiving element, but there was a stretch here where my party started falling apart completely. Like, I did not mean for any of this stuff to happen. I was playing as a good guy. I was trying to be nice with everybody. And it wasn't like I was trying to include evil people in my party and like just unable to square that circle. I guess I was trying to be like polite to Ari when she was flirting with me, but I also had kind of a romance going on with Jaheira, and they started fighting and I didn't take their side properly or whatever. And Ari just said, well, fine, I'm leaving. And she just left. I'm like, well, shit, that was my magic person. So now I have to go get Nalia, who's another wizard that kind of picked up some slack there. But then she gets kidnapped by the guy that she was in an arranged marriage with. And there's a whole plot line there. I'm like, well, I got to go do that plot line now. But I still don't have a wizard. And then some random person pops up and poisons Jaheira. And now she's going to die if I don't get her cured in like a couple of days. And I'm like, well, crap. Everything's going sideways.
So, I mean,
all my magic women are falling apart on me.
This brings up an interesting point for me. I think it's clear that we all kind of went the same route with what our character was in BG2. But I'd love to know what our parties were comprised of.
I'm curious about this too. I mean, I think I went for the most basic possible. Minsk, I don't think ever left the party.
Nope,
Jaheira, of course. I don't know. I had Animan in there for a while. I didn't like him, but he was kind of filling a needed role, and I had Haxit as long as I could. Let's see. Who else was in there? Yoshimo, of course. He was my thief, and yeah, I guess it was kind of a revolving door beyond that. Oh, and Ari was there a lot too. Yeah,
I had Minsk and Jaheira the whole time. Like I said, I sort of started up a romance storyline with Jaheira, but it never actually consummated anything. I don't know why, but I never got to the payoff portion. I just, probably didn't walk into the right tavern and in the right chapter or whatever that needed to happen. But again, I almost kind of like that that it was a little more organic, and we missed our chance. And like I said, Minsk stuck around. I had Yoshimo until he betrayed me, and then Imoen took his place as the thief. I had Nalia for quite a while.
And Nalia for a bit, yeah.
Eventually, I picked up Mazzy Fenton, who was like a halfling paladin.
Fun.
I mean, that's not a thing you can technically do in the D&D rules, but that's what she is. But she is sort of another fighter and archer that picked up a lot of slack there. And I think, how many people was that? I had Valagar for a while. Like the 6th slot, I did would be a little more fungible. I'd pick somebody up and do the quest line with them and then ditch them. But you want to keep the same party as much as possible because they level up.
Yep.
If they're with you and they don't otherwise. So that was what I mainly did.
Yep. I played good the first Baldur's Gate 1, and this one I was like, yeah, I'm going to go evil. Doing the full evil run. And so my party was Dorn, Hexat, Ari, Edwin, and what's the name of the dwarf?
Corgan?
Corgan?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, man. And having them all like happy when I would like just off somebody or steal somebody's money or it was just, it was pleasant. Like the way that they were able to not make you feel like a horrible human being and like, yeah, my friends like me and this is so cool. They're encouraging me to go down this route. and having a vampire in your party is a really, really cool thing. Really cool thing. The whole quest line with her is fantastic.
Yeah, that was one of the high points of the entire thing for me, was the Hexit.
And it's a thing I never got to touch, doing the good way.
It's cool. It's I mean, you spend when you meet Hexit, she's like a different character. She is
she's a thrall, I think.
Yeah, she's a thrall basically, and you can tell she's weird, but you're kind of just like, it's interesting that this is a party member they're giving me. I'm gonna follow this quest line through, and you take her into a crypt. And the whole time she's like, I know I need to go there. My head is hurting, that kind of thing. And
yeah. So I didn't bother with this because I guess I had an assumption that I didn't think about too much, but with it, okay, she wasn't that interesting because she was like, clearly, you are a brainwashed vampire. That's going to be an issue for me as a paladin undead hunter at some point. But also, we're like, okay, she's going to join the party, but probably long enough to go to the graveyard she wants to go to. And then she'll turn on us right there and we'll fight her and that'll be it. But you can actually keep her in your party long term. I didn't even realize that.
Well,
she turns into the actual vampire Hexat. Yeah.
Yeah. That character dies and is replaced by the person who's kind of possessed her, I guess you'd say. It's cool. It's a good plot line. And there's another, and there's an evil vampire that she wants your help fighting. So, there's I don't know. She's still evil. She's a vampire. I couldn't keep her long term, but it was good. It worked out for a short term thing. So.
And you could have Aerie in your evil party. She didn't bug out on you.
Yeah. So I actually went down into the walkthrough guide area, and I was like, okay, because at the time I didn't have Edwin, and I was building up this evil party. I really wanted Hexat, and so that's what I was going to do as an evil party. Got Dorn. I was like, I need magic users that aren't going to leave an evil party. And they're like, well, Jaheira's going to leave, and this person's going to leave, and this person's going to leave. I was like, okay, can I use anybody? And apparently, Aerie is a person that, as long as you don't drop your reputation too much, she'll stick around with all the evil people.
That's crazy. I would not have guessed that. And she fucked off from me because when she was fighting with Jaheira, I said, hey, why don't you both calm down? So this is, I think, another question we want to ask of all these Bioware games is, between the good path and the evil path, or the Paragon and Renegade, as they do it in Mass Effect, is one clearly superior to the other?
Sometimes. I don't know.
I think the game is designed around you being good. I think
most
they give you some cool stuff to do, but
I think it's hard to design a game around being evil. I think that the cool thing that Baldur's Gate does with the ball spawn concept, which is their way of incorporating the chosen one element to establish why, no matter what kind of character you create, they are the most important person in this world. That's a tough thing to do narratively, while also making that character kind of a blank slate. But the ball spawn thing, I think, fits that needle pretty elegantly, and it makes total sense if you are an evil son of a bitch just rolling around murdering people there. I think it's more dramatically compelling if you are trying to be a good guy despite that. And also sorry.
There was a great moment. No, it's cool. There's a great moment with Dorn, who's like, Dorn's like, hey, so your dad was Ball. And I'm like, yeah. He's like, that's pretty cool. So are you gonna be like a god? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, that's really cool. And of course I was female, and so there was some sexual tension there, which made it even more elevated. But having this badass orc paladin who's like, hey, so your dad's really evil and really powerful. I like that. I'm all about it.
Yeah, no, I think it's cool that it makes sense either way. I do think the games tend to be, it's easier to build stories around people who are not psychopaths.
But it's great when they land the psychopath narrative.
It does. Yeah.
It's pretty exciting and kind of exhilarating. I mean, this is the next one we're going to talk about, Knights of the Old Republic. Playing evil in that is the way to go.
Yeah, I honestly, that game blew my mind. My mind.
Yeah.
We'll get to that. There's a lot more of Baldur's Gate stuff to get through.
I mean, last word on that. I do think that I do think it can be limiting to have good and evil binary morality systems, like because when it starts rewarding being super good or super evil, it takes away some of the choice. It feels like, like you're on a
I do
path.
dislike. Yeah, I agree with you. It's bad when they introduce like gameplay bonuses or penalties
Yeah.
for being like the Knights of the Old Republic series falls into this, where
Yep.
it punishes neutrality, or
Yep.
not even
Mhm.
neutrality, but nuance. Like, and it rewards you for being the most evil or the most good.
Yep.
Like to a absurd caricature degree.
And
One of my favorite
yeah.
games, Deus Ex, actually I think threads this needle perfectly because it allows you to run that middle road, and you have choices at every stop that allow you to be neutral. You get about equivalent bonuses, and at the end of the game, you can choose the neutral route, and it's an ending that's acceptable.
And they're different bonuses, but they're not like just no bonus versus having a bonus.
Yep, exactly.
I think they are kind of, as games mature and age, and old ones kind of get processed by the makers. This is becoming better because I like when they just eliminate the binary choice at all, and you get something like The Witcher 3, which has some of the most satisfying morality I've ever seen in a game, because there's not a right or wrong choice. You're not getting rewards for being good or evil. It's just that what you do has ramifications, and it changes the narrative in some way. That's the stuff that is really cool. And I think that you don't get there without Knights of the Old Republic, and maybe you don't get to Knights without Baldur's Gate. This is the Bioware thing, is just sort of evolved.
Well, I think like Dragon Age,
that might
represents
be the best.
like they abandon sort of the point system of, you can have good points and bad points, or Paragon renegade points, whatever it is. And it's a more nuanced, there's still the influence system where, like, if you're a shithead to your party members, that has effects on your party dynamics. Like Dragon Age 2, for example, kind of was a bridge there, but they did the exact same thing. They kind of fucked it up where you get bonuses if you like sweet talk your party members and get them like fully in love with you. Then they're devoted to you and get bonuses. But then if you antagonize them completely till they hate you, but they're still like fighting with you, then you get bonuses for like rivalry, they call it. That it inspires them to like fight harder or something. And like, but it's just the same thing of, well, now you're pushing me to either be like a total simp, like fawning over them totally, or being addicted to them for no reason. And the gameplay is pushing me to do one of those things instead of just reacting to them as I feel like doing based on my own personality.
That's an ambitious system, though. Like Dragon Age 2, for all its faults, has some really interesting ideas that don't fully come together, but it's cool that they tried them, and they'd probably lead to better versions of it later. That'll be an interesting one to revisit. I don't know, in 2025, whenever we get there. That's
yeah. I think there's one more element of story to talk about here, which is, well, maybe there's two, because I do it like one thing I'm kind of curious to track is the MacGuffin system. Like, how do you, and this is, I think, what is difficult about doing one of these stories with an evil character is how do you motivate people to like follow the story path if that person's thing is, well, I don't care like who got hurt in the last act. I don't care about anybody. And
revenge,
it has to work for the good and the evil.
Revenge, and rage, and I'm gonna get that.
Well,
asshole.
this does, it sets up Irenicus right away, and he does stuff to you. He also kidnaps Imoen, which means something to a good player. But it also has to be a thing where you have to need to follow him, even if you don't care about her. That's like a difficult thing to figure out. And I think Irenicus is a strong enough villain whose master plan is so tied up in you and your specific destiny as the ball spawn, and that it does a good job of motivating you, whether you're good, neutral, or evil, into following the plot paths.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, the character work in this, I think Irenicus is a great example of video game writing, especially for this era. Even in that opening dungeon, you get more of a sense of him than you ever get of, the what's his name, Sarevok. There's already contradictions and interesting realities about who this guy is that you're kind of just like, that's actually not what I would expect. There's all that stuff going on early on, and he sticks that way. And David Warner helps a lot. Like, I mean, that's something that you can't really underrate for this, is just how good the writing is for all these plot lines, and the characters, and the twist that this takes. Like Yoshimo turning evil is such a shock, or every little subquest has elements like that. It really does feel like it's all been planned out in advance by an effective, conscientious DM. It really has that vibe, and that
probably was
right. Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if it was D&D people writing this.
And part of the thing about Irenicus is that he doesn't have too much of the Bond villain, like dragging my feet for no particular reason. Like, he's got a reason for not killing you outright at the beginning, and he's got kind of one eye on you and one eye on his grander revenge plot, which is pretty good stuff. I think that it turns out he's got a pretty big plan that makes sense. It gives his backstory some definition. It doesn't make him sympathetic or likable by any means, but his history with the elves that he wants revenge on. It's good stuff. The other thing I like about it is that the big grandiose villain here, they didn't like break their backs trying to come up with like a demigod or like an interdimensional whatever. He's just, he is a very powerful archmage, and they just figure, what, if we give him like character and motivation, then he can just be really powerful at magic, and that's all that, like, he doesn't need to be a creature of destiny like you are.
Yeah, no, it's good.
Yeah, and David Warner certainly helps.
Oh yeah,
probably MVP of the voice
at
cast.
Maximum imperiousness in every line reading. It's just oozing contempt and impatience. It's great.
And that is refreshing that, like, here you are in this sort of in-game of, oh my god, everybody is a dimensional beast or beholder or dragon, and the big bad guy, who's still like tough to take down, is human. Like that is kind of refreshing in the scheme of everything else that's happening.
Well, he's just a wizard who's like a little higher level than you. Like, that's and that can work fine. It turns out. But anyway, all right, let's jump on to our final section here, which is something that I again was sort of with more of an eye towards the later Bioware games. It was like, why hasn't this been adapted to TV or film? Now, with Baldur's Gate, I think the question becomes a little more general about just like the trouble of adapting Dungeons and Dragons as a system, as a world. And I think that Dungeons and Dragons is sort of deceptively difficult to do, because it is the highest of high fantasy. Even in today's world where the nerds have sort of taken over, this is the nerdiest of nerd shit. And it's also not quite as kid friendly as you would think.
No, and I think that Baldur's Gate series, it gets into the sex, drugs, and rock and roll. The murders, this guy skinning people alive, like, it doesn't hold anything back. It's like getting in the meat of what people and dark people do.
Well, maybe on your evil playthrough, I was an upstanding young man.
I mean,
a very polite boy.
They've certainly made attempts at adapting D&D to film. Probably the most successful is the cartoon series from the 80s, I would think, right? I mean,
which is very kid friendly.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it obviously is limited in what it's even trying to do, but like, I mean, just in comparison to everything else, like, the others are just completely bad, complete failures. And video games seems like a bit more fertile ground to adapt. They've certainly given it more shots and more bigger success rate. But I think Baldur's Gate 2 is a good representation of the problems with slavish imitation. It's exactly D&D.
You certainly need to do some adaptation.
Unsatisfying. Yeah.
What was giving me some trouble when I was trying to think this through was that it doesn't. The two most obvious routes for something like this to take in today's climate don't seem to fit it. That the story is too big and too sprawling to do in like a movie.
No way.
Yeah.
But it doesn't fit like a prestige cable or streaming format where they'll put a lot of money behind it, which you need to do effects for this type of thing. But 8 or 10, maybe 12 episodes, like the story here is so diffuse that if you tried to like just do the plot beats of Baldur's Gate 2 and even more so Baldur's Gate 1, there's not really enough there to fill out 10 or 12 episodes.
I think that I'm trying to parse it in my head. I think that the only way you could do it is do it the way that they're doing with The Witcher, which is you have this. They have the core of what's necessary for a story, like the destined one, and got to get to a place, do a thing that's going to change the world. Like you have that down. But I think the way they have to do it is the AB format, and then in every episode you have a piece of that overarching story. But the core of what's happening in each episode would be like the quest line for Jaheira. Next episode would be the quest line for Dorne, or whatever it is. So that there's like a character, an interesting story. Meanwhile, there's little beats about Irenicus or Savarok or whatever it is, and then eventually we get to like episode 10 of a series, and that's like a big bad moment.
I was thinking more like it's going back to an older like network TV.
Yes, Hercules, the Legendary Journeys, or something.
Yeah. Okay, I was thinking of like Angel or something like that, where like Saravok or Irenicus could be like the Wolfram Hart, like overarching villain that recurs throughout the season, and the season finale is probably going to involve them more heavily. But any given episode is probably more of a one-off adventure. Like
we're in a Knoll Castle this week. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that we're captured in the Mind Flayer dungeon this week. Whatever.
Spider Crypts again. Yeah. Well, is there room for that though? I mean, obviously, I think at this exact moment in time, there is no room for a Baldur's Gate D&D series because there's Witcher, there's Wheel of Time, there's the Lord of the Rings coming. There, we have a bit of a glut on the way.
Well, I think that the production problem there is that that model I was just talking about is for like a 24 episode season.
Yeah.
And to do because of that, the examples we're reaching for are from an earlier era where like the budgets were just not behind Hercules and Xena and Angel. Like they weren't doing it at a Game of Thrones or a Wheel of Time level of effects and production value for that many episodes a year. But I still think that's the way to do it. Maybe with technology advancing, maybe in the Mandalorian studio that they have, that's I guess just the holodeck, they could kind of like figure that out. But you bring up the Wheel of Time, and that is something that I've been watching that show and it hasn't fully been clicking with me. And I think it's because it has a lot of the trouble that putting Dungeons and Dragons on the screen would have, which is a world of just too much magic. Everything revolves around magic. Mm-hmm. And because of that, like you get to a place very early in Wheel of Time, like episode 3, where we see like a major character get their throat graphically cut out. And then 30 seconds later, somebody waves their hand over them and they're like alive again. Ooh, and it sets this tone of like, whatever happens, we can undo it in the same scene. Like nothing's going to stick here.
Yeah. The main thing with Wheel of Time is it's kind of clarified for me, like how well Game of Thrones is doing at the beginning in explaining itself and making its magic systems and its form of government and etc. clear to people. That's not an easy thing, it turns out, because Wheel of Time, I'm watching it, it's fine, but yeah, everything's a bit of a mess and a bit of a confusion for me. And I think any fantasy series is just kind of going to run into that trouble unless they're really on point.
The difference to me is that Game of Thrones starts with the magic really deep in the background, and it introduces you to its political systems and so forth. And then the magic starts sort of intruding on that more and more as time goes on, and the dragons become a bigger portion and all that. Whereas Wheel of Time, like the political systems are all built around the magic as the source of all the power and everything. Like,
right.
And so it feels a little more frivolous that way.
And that's very similar to D&D. I mean, living in Althaka and Baldur's Gate, like there's literal groups that have the power because they have the magic.
Yeah, I think that's the main hurdle of bringing Dungeons and Dragons to the screen. And I think this is something that probably every Bioware game, I'll beat the same drum about it, is that you need to dial down the magic and the
Mhm.
biotics, as the case may be. Like make it, the magic needs to be a rare and powerful thing. But there's a problem, I think, in that in a gameplay system, you want the magic to be kind of ubiquitous because it gives a whole nother layer of like strategy on top of the combat, and it introduces a lot of variables and different ways to attacks and defenses and ways to keep combat different, varied up. But in terms of world building in a dramatic sense, having magic everywhere and everything just means that somebody can get their throat cut on screen and it doesn't mean shit. Like nothing happens.
Here's
Yeah.
my
So-
rod of resurrection. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and even in that moment, they were just like, "Oh, that's magic we don't understand." It's like, "Oh God, yeah, okay."
But yeah, I don't know what you do understand because that's still being established. So I guess that's mysterious, but I don't. It's more just confusing. Dungeons and Dragons has the thing of two different magic systems, which
At least
I think you could actually do something kind of interesting with, or different, like more unique with. I kind of like the idea that there's the priest magic, the religious stuff that is more mysticism and the occult or the divine or whatever. Maybe that's a little more voodoo-y or satanic, whatever, as the case may be. And then you've got the other branch of wizard magic, which is a little more like mad science. And I think you could set up a system of culture around that. I think you need to make the mad science wizardry pretty rare. That there's not too many of them running around, and maybe the priest magic. I was thinking like, okay, maybe that's a thing where you can. It's more powerful in certain places. Like this god is more powerful. The elves' god is powerful in the forest. Down in the beholders or the drow city, the drow god, like their magic is more powerful. It's a little harder to do for Jaheira to do her nature magic down in the Underdark.
it's kind of how Lord of the Rings handles it, actually.
It's how
Yeah,
I
I bet.
ran my D&D campaign.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
where you just don't need to know, but at the same time, maybe you do need to know. So, in some extent, it's a tough needle thread, to say the least. And I mean, it's mostly, I think, easy to recognize when it's failing. When they're not getting it
Sure.
right is when it is clearest that there's a problem. So I don't know, man. I mean, what you're saying about like maybe just avoiding the magic altogether and slowly, kind of in dribs and drabs, it comes out to be the way to go. If you're doing a D&D show, you start in like one big D&D city, Waterdeep or whatever, and just sort of establish the city and establish how things work there. And oh shit, there's a monster, at the end of episode 1 or whatever, and just slowly build it up, frog in the boiling water kind of style. And so by the time magic gets there, you're already invested in other things.
I don't know. I think D&D, like the whole setting is so drenched in all this stuff that you can't have you can't have somebody born and raised in the Forgotten Realms be taken aback by a null.
Yeah.
And on top of that, if you're doing Baldur's Gate, you're starting them off in Candlekeep, I guess, which is a sort of magical environment. I do think there's something to be said for Baldur's Gate 1 having magic be kind of fewer and far between. That like the town of Baldur's Gate is run by like a mercenary company more than it is wizards, and when you get to Athkatla 2, that is a more expressly magical society, and by then we're kind of knee deep in this stuff. But the one thing that, like what I was getting at with all the stuff about priest magic, is it gets you maybe away from the biggest problem I think with Dungeons and Dragons magic, which is the ability to raise the dead is just like a complete dramatic like drama killer. And the way that it's a game mechanic that you can raise the dead if you have like a middle level spell from priest magic. So you make it so like, okay, maybe you can raise the dead if you take them to a particular, like a consecrated temple in the city,
like in Baldur's Gate, right?
Yeah, it's got to be in the place. You can't just do it on the fly outside. And it occurred to me too, like, and maybe you have to do it quickly. That
for the body rots, of course.
Before the body rots, or like the mind doesn't come back fully if too much time has gone on. And I was thinking maybe this is how Minsk got to be how he is, and how you introduce this dynamic and say, well, yeah, he was dead for like 3 days, and he was pretty sharp before that, and now he is what he is, you know.
But like at the
And
end of the day, I think that the real question is the story of this ball spawn coming to Destiny interesting enough to adapt?
I think so. I don't know. I mean,
Well, I agree that it wouldn't be the focus in the way so many of these things have an in-game focus. You know, Wheel of Time certainly has an in-game focus. You know, who will sit on the Iron Throne is an in-game focus. I don't think the proper way to adapt something like this would be with that level of end-game focus. It would be, you know, on the episodic week to week. Oh, you know, it's the Knoll dungeon. You know, like we've talking about. Like that's what I want to see from.
in the sense of this, like maybe Game of Thrones is not the thing to try and emulate here as much as like a Fringe, for example, like having a mythology that unravels a lot more slowly. And I assume Fringe eventually had an end game, even though I didn't get through it all. But it was built to be an episodic show where the mythology elements got layered in over time and gradually take over the show. And maybe that's how this goes. Like, yeah, you're probably going to need to seed in some stuff about Sarevok in the first episode. But you could also kind of let that lie and be simmering in the background for a while.
So kind of like 90s era TV, where they're just sort of starting to play around with the idea of mythology and long running narratives. You know, when that's sort of new to the game. Yeah.
I think it's kind of a throwback to that with 21st century production values is what you need.
Yeah. Okay.
And then I think the way structurally, I think the way you do it is you set up in the first episode, but is with Candlekeep, and you go through the opening parts with like your standard, young hero fighter guy, and then when they flee, and Sarevok kills Gorion, have him also kill the fighter guy, and then Imoen becomes the central character of the show going forward. Because it turns out, John, I don't know if you got this far in Baldur's Gate 2. It turns out Imoen's also a ball spawn.
I saw it on the videos explaining what happens in the game. Yeah, good twist, actually. I mean, again, good writing in this. It tells you good things, and it really works. And I mean, again, I think it's probably because it's a video game. You know, I don't know that it wouldn't hang together as a movie or a show or even a novel. I think it has to be. It's written well for the format, or it would work as a D&D adventure as well. You know, and so that I think is ultimately what impresses me most about Baldur's Gate 2. At the end, it really, really translates the experience of playing D&D. I have my quibbles with the mechanics of it, but that's what kind of kept me going as far as I did go. Was just that I was just like, this is quite impressive, you know. And the art style is you know, kind of, it's hard to engage with at first, but the more you get into it, more kind of, you know, it is evocative of playing Dungeons and Dragons. It's mind's eye kind of stuff, you know. The isometric top down, it's kind of like looking at a grid, you know, with figurines on it. It's good. It's really cool that it does that. You know, I wish the mechanics engaged me more, but yeah, it was more playable. But I mean, I understand why it has the reputation it does. In summation.
And I completely agree with that. I mean, even as somebody who has been entrenched in D&D since I was 13 playing this format, it is, you know, got its warts in this day and age, but what keeps me going is the questing. It's the characters, it's the writing, it's the voice acting. You know, I think it's just sort of like, great, I want to get to this next thing, irrespective of, even though I'm going to be fighting a dragon for the 14th time.
I think all that stuff that you were just talking about, Tyler, will get better and tighter as we get into the next game, which is Knights of the Old Republic, which is a huge step forward in terms of a new console, new graphical engine that allows for a more cinematic presentation.
I look forward to hearing it. It's even an evolution of the combat system, actually. It maintains sort of the idea, but makes it playable. That one I played during the pandemic, and you know, part of the reason we're doing this, honestly, is how easy that was to jump into in 2021. So we'll be talking about Knights of the Old Republic quite soon. And Tyler, you got to do Dragon Age.
I know
Oh,
you
yeah.
recommended it to me, I think last time, and
Yeah.
it's going to happen. I'm trying to cover off the Divinity Original Sin series. I'm doing that with my brother right now,
I
which
heard
is
great
I
things.
think it's a great CRPG. I think it succeeds where Baldur's Gate still has warts. There's issues with the systems, but it's a good game all around.
Well, and I don't think it'll take us 8 months to get to Knights of the Old Republic.
No, surely not.
I've played through that one several times already. It took me, 22, 23 years to finish Baldur's Gate 2 for the first time. But I know I can
Excellent.
beat Knights of the Old Republic.
Excellent. All right. Well, that'll be the next one of these that we do for sure. And then there's some more. And eventually we'll get through it all. All right. Nice to talk to you, Tyler. As always, thanks for coming back with us. And yeah, we appreciate it. We want to hear more about this as you go through these as well.
I appreciate you having me back. I love talking to you guys. Yeah, thank you.
All right.
And
Talk
fun.
to you later, Al.